suppose when I was trying to put this presentation together, we're obviously conscious of COVID and what's happened the last year and a half or longer now, and maybe what the future holds and so forth. So just trying to cover certain areas and look at different scenarios and so forth. So if you just next slide there, please. So yeah, so I suppose we're going to remote audits. I suppose what are the definition, the advantages, disadvantages, reporting. I suppose just kind of summary of transfer of data to FLC. Various methods have been used, second level audits, best practice for submission of claims, and I suppose a few comments on maybe what the future holds for FLC in second level audits or whatever down the road. So yeah, so I suppose the question is, what's a remote audit? A remote audit, also known as a virtual audit, is a method of conducting an audit remotely using electronic means such as video conferencing, email, and telephone to obtain audit evidence, just like you would basically on site. The overall aim is to evaluate this evidence objectively and to determine the extent to which the audit criteria has been fulfilled. Next slide, please. Okay, so remote auditing provided a springboard for tools such as file and screen sharing, video conferencing, the various platforms in Skype, Teams, Zoom, live data analysis, other platforms that we've all become familiar with over the last year and a half or whatever. Yeah, and it's obviously, like, I mean, before we would have been used to holding meetings and on sites and second level audits and so forth, and physically on site or whatever. Whereas this had opened up a whole new area that unknown to us, basically, that we had to adapt to. Next slide, please. I suppose the advantages is one of the benefits is that the ability to allow auditors to receive and share data, review documentation, and process, I suppose, conduct interviews and make observations with auditees without the need basically to commute to basically the audit site, really, like, you know. So it meant that we could meetings online or whatever, and basically conduct basically as much as we possibly could that we would normally do online as opposed to being on site. It also allowed for the utilization of technology to carry out audits remotely, also saves time and money, and data can be accessed, I suppose, nearly from most locations now and various portals and so forth. Next slide, please. So some of the disadvantages, there's probably a lot of them there, but some of them they're trying to come up with the last few days. Again, technology, I suppose, is the big issue, really. Like, I mean, we've all probably had our problems with broadband up and down, poor coverage, poor connection. So network connections are not very reliable, or be difficult to carry out interviews, and meetings can be interrupted. And it may take some time to reconnect and resolve all the network problems. Access to relevant databases and systems may not be possible remotely. I mean, if you're on site, there might be certain databases that you can get access to information from that you wouldn't be able to get access to, obviously because of possibly GDPR and access rights and so forth, if you're trying to access them remotely. So they were all issues that had to be looked at, I suppose, and taken into consideration. And there's probably lots of more disadvantages as well, but they were the few that I kind of came across and came up with in the last few days. Next slide, please. Okay, reporting. I suppose the COVID pandemic had a huge impact on the way we work. Everybody's familiar with that. Procedures and systems literally changed overnight. And I suppose from our point of view, I mean, from FLC prior to COVID, partners uploaded their expenditure claims on whatever portal they were putting information on, EMS or IOLA for Synergy, and they submitted this documentation in hard copy form to the controller. So basically a package arrived into our office in Waterford with all the backup documentation from the partners, and the information was put up on the system. So and we operated on that basis prior to COVID. Next slide, please. The impact of COVID-19 means that organisations were forced to introduce remote working, and which led to periods of uncertainty and challenges ahead. The Regional Assemblies here were no different to any other organisation, as all our staff were working remotely, and we had to kind of adapt to this new environment really, and come up with ways of trying to continue to provide the level of service that we were providing previously with the restrictions that were in place. So project partners were asked basically to submit their supporting documentation electronically via the FLC at southernAssembly.ie email address. And we did issue a guidance email or note there back in April 2020 to all partners. I suppose when COVID came in and when lockdown started, it was the middle of March, and a lot of, as you know, a lot of partners had submitted, well, most partners had submitted their expenditure and documentation at the start of January, February, or whatever for claims, and we were kind of in a scenario at that stage where we had a lot of claims processed, and some partners, some claims came in, but we had a lot of the claims processed at that stage or whatever before, I suppose, the real impacts of the lockdown. So we obviously then had to think about claims that would have been coming in for the first 6 months of 2020, which had been the end of June, July, and August, and obviously, when lockdown was still in place, we, as I said, we circulated the guidance document asking partners or whatever to submit the documentation, and the FLC at southernAssembly.ie email address. We set that up a couple of years ago, basically, so that partners can submit queries or information to that email address, and obviously your documentation would have come in there to that email address, and we would recommend partners, if they're emailing us, to use that email address, because just myself and the lads in the unit, I mean, we could be in and out on leave or various different things, and if you send emails directly to our own personal email address, we mightn't be able to get access to it for a couple of days if somebody's off site or away or whatever, so that email address, any emails coming to that is bounced off all our emails in the unit, so somebody will get it and somebody will respond to it in due course. Next slide, please. Okay, I suppose we're looking there, I suppose the last week or so, basically looking at, I suppose, how partners transfer their data to us after the lockdown and during lockdown, basically. And so some of the ways that were used to share documents, partners use Dropbox or zip files, or WeTransfer files, or the HENet file sender or OneDrive storage. Most of them were okay. We did have a couple of problems with documentation coming in through WeTransfer files. Some of the files, when we got access to them, didn't seem to have the documentation that didn't seem to be there. The files are blank or whatever, so there was a bit of correspondence over and back with Yvonne, who's our assistant staff officer, who would manage all that for us, basically, when it comes in. And I suppose the procedure really for us is that, and I'll comment on it again as we get to the end of this presentation, that partners would upload their expenditure to the portal and send their documentation electronically to the FLC at southernAssembly.ie email address. Yvonne, as I said, is our staff officer who would look after all that documentation. She would store it on our cloud system and basically update our ETC register, and so we know the claim is in, and basically issue an acknowledgement email then to the partner to obviously to confirm that we got the documentation, so that they know we have it and it's in our possession, basically. And just to so, as I said, there were some of the methods that we used and have been and continue to be used to share documentation, so to enable us to process your claim. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay, second level audits. We've had two since COVID began, basically. Both are done remotely by the audit firm Ernst & Young, based in Paris. So their procedures were basically a desk review of documentation provided. So basically they selected it, I think for both audits, they selected two reports basically, and they asked the partner to basically send over the backup documentation. So it'd be a bit like sending us the documentation in Waterford to do your claim. They would have sent their documentation electronically to the auditors in Paris. Then they would have conducted an online introductory meeting, basically discussing the audit. They would have done an interview with the project manager and other responsible persons in the project, and then they would have had an interview, online interview with ourselves, personal controller, basically, on the claim and the process of the claim. Next slide, please. Okay, basically, as part of their audit, they conducted tests and they digitalised project documentation provided to support the expenditure subject to review. Remote verification of the reality of the project and its activities, and then there was an online final meeting to this, basically in discussions on the audit findings. A couple of small findings or whatever, like, you know, so they would have been discussed online with the project partner, and I know that the audit we had this year, I attended that online as well, and I had the opportunity to contribute to that meeting at the end. And then basically a draft report basically is published and sent to the partner and lead partner, and the project partners in a 10-day, what they call a contradictory phase, basically to respond to any draft findings so in the report. So you have an opportunity to basically, I suppose, provide additional information to resolve any queries they may have, or to assist to resolve any queries or whatever that they have in the draft report. And then it depends on whether they're happy enough with what's submitted, and they decide then basically whether to remove the findings from the report or to basically make them as final findings in the final report, like, you know. So that was the process on that. Again, as I said, those second level audits in previous years would have been done on site, where auditors would have come from Paris, Ernst & Young in Paris, especially here to the location in Ireland, to whatever partner was subject to a second level audit, and to look at their books and records. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what's best practice for submission of claims in the virtual world and digital at the moment? Is would be to gather your supporting evidence for your claim, scan the relevant documents, ensuring the images are readable. I mean, that's important. Obviously, sometimes we get documentation and when we're looking through it, it's half it is missing, or bits of it, or the important piece with the relevant figures or whatever is not included or hasn't been scanned properly. So it's important to make sure that when you gather your documentation, you go through your documentation and ensure that it's readable and that it's legible, and that shows the information that's required is on it, basically. I suppose, in fairness, like, a lot of people are being good at that, like, you know, I mean, and organising their documentation. Create a folder for each budget line and include the relevant documents, put in there, input the eligible costs on the portal, share your documents with the FLC again, whatever method, we transfer or HE in it or whatever. Submit your claim on the portal and notify FLC by email that you have submitted the claim. That is something, because we're in out of so many databases every day and we have so many claims on the go, it's hard to keep basically on top of everything. As I said, Yvonne is our staff officer who's responsible for basically processing and monitoring all the information that's coming, because as you can imagine, when we change from basically getting parcels either delivered to the office by DHL or by on post or whatever, to basically all our documentation, your documentation coming in electronically, our email traffic would have been fairly high, and we want to make sure that we didn't miss anything, and that basically everything that we basically were able to make sure that our documentation that came in was recorded and saved in the appropriate file. So it's important really that when you submit your claim online and on the portal, that you send us an email to say that your claim has been submitted and that your supporting documentation is attached to that email or is on its way, basically, and whatever means you prepare to share it with us, like, you know. So because we've had a couple of cases where people thought they submitted the documentation to us, and our records show the claim wasn't submitted, and therefore the claim was there for quite a while, until such time as the partner came looking for it. And again, as I said, I've said all the time that it's a responsibility of the project partner to ensure that your claim is submitted in full basically to us, because we have so many claims coming in and trying to turn them around and meet so many deadlines. We're only basically conscious of the fact that what claims we have on site that we need to move at any particular period of time, like, you know. So it's a responsibility of the project partner to ensure that their own claim is submitted in a timely fashion and with the appropriate documentation as well to back up the expenditure reported. Next slide, please. Okay, future for FLC and second level audits. I suppose for second level audits and on-sites as well from FLC, they'll probably consist of a combination of remote and on-site visits, on-site audits. I know as David mentioned there this morning, the planning for the new programs, they have already built in for administrative checks and on-site checks can be carried out basically physically or virtually or whatever. So they have decided that, you know, some checks can be carried out virtually or whatever going forward in the event that with COVID or we have similar or related events that may prevent us from going on site or whatever, like, you know. There's a new IT system called GEMS being developed at the moment by Interact, and that will replace the old EMS for 21 to 27. And back in May there, myself and David had a meeting with Northwest Europe, and we were discussing basically the new system. And I know this came up at a workshop back in Budapest in January 2020, just before COVID kicked in, basically, where the Interreg Europe program brought all the FLCs together to discuss the future reporting procedures and systems. And there was an overwhelming agreement that they wanted, I suppose, a system where project partners could put their documentation up at source on the system, and that at various levels along the FLC lead partner secretariat that they would have certain access rights or whatever to that system. That's what we would hope will happen with this new GEM system, that instead of each partner having to email or send their documentation into us in electronic form, that it could be put up on the system at partner level, and then FLC could get access to it once it's been submitted to the FLC section on the next level. We raised this with Northwest Europe, and they agreed that it'd be a good idea, but basically at the end of the day, they said it was going to cost them quite a bit of money. It wouldn't happen. So one of the things that we may have to consider, I suppose, is down the road, we are going to continue with documentation being submitted electronically, and we may have to look at maybe developing a portal ourselves to give partners the opportunity and access to upload their documentation, or to come up with some sort of a system, a secure system compliant with the GDPR and so forth, to ensure that, I just want to give comfort to partners as well, that they can transfer their documentation without any issues, basically, on that. Other areas that programs are thinking, and David mentioned that some of that's smart and simplified cost options. They're thinking, as you're all familiar, basically with the office administration costs is a flat rate of 15% of staff costs, and now they're talking about maybe having a simplified cost option for travel and accommodation, which would mean that partners wouldn't have to basically submit any documentation for validating for validation of their travel costs. They would have to submit for travel claims and bank statements and so forth. That was something that was being pushed by Interreg Europe or Northwest Europe, but basically I wasn't in favour of it. But anyway, I think simplified cost options are going to be down the road, something that are going to be prevalent down the road in a lot of the programs. So yeah, there are some of the areas anyway. So I hopefully that you got some information out of that anyway. So, and thanks for your time.